Coverage of Today Early News. After 12 years as leader of the Roman Catholic Church, Pope Francis has died at the age of 88. This morning, confirmation from the Vatican, he passed away from stroke and heart failure. As we go to air, these are live pictures from St. Peter's Square in Vatican City, where thousands are gathering for a prayer service. The Pontiff's death follows his recent battle with double pneumonia, almost a month after he was released from hospital, the Pope committing to his duties up until the end. 9 Europe correspondent Jessica Millward begins our coverage.
He was a Pope of the people until his very last day. Just hours before his death, the Holy Father greeted the faithful on Easter Sunday.
Buona Pasqua.
Dear brothers and sisters, Happy Easter.
From the Pope-mobile, a final blessing and a farewell in St. Peter's Square. 24 hours later, his reign is over and the masses mourn.
It is a shock to have it happen so suddenly because he had his last public appearance yesterday.
I think he was wonderful. His simplicity, his kindness, his care of people.
From the Vatican to Australia.
The first Pope from the Southern Hemisphere was close to the people of Australia. For Australian Catholics, he was a devoted champion and loving father.
He lived frugally and simply. Above all else, he was driven by Christ's values of mercy and forgiveness.
Francis was a trailblazer, the first Pope born out of Europe in 12 centuries and the first Jesuit to hold the role, elected in 2013.
Buonasera.
He was a divine disruptor, a reformer who defied tradition and tried to modernise an ancient church.
He was, of course, a Pope of the Southern Hemisphere. I always found him very easy to talk to, very informal, rather like an Australian in that respect.
His health had been on the decline, hospitalised with double pneumonia earlier this year. He would never recover. But the Pope kept working until his last days, meeting world leaders including the King and the US Vice President.
So good to see you.
This morning, the world is in shock and the Catholic Church is forever changed.
And let's bring in 9's Europe correspondent Jessica Millward, who is live for us in Rome. Jess, as we mentioned earlier, his cause of death has been revealed. What more can you tell us?
Good morning, Ali. Good evening to you here in Rome on this very significant day. The Vatican has now confirmed that Pope Francis passed away after suffering a stroke that put him into a coma that caused catastrophic heart failure. So he had a stroke and then a heart attack, and we know that he was pronounced deceased at 7:30 this morning. What an extraordinary 24 hours we've seen. It was this time yesterday, Ali, that I was chatting to you in London on the Today Show, looking at those extraordinary images of Pope Francis out and about with the crowds. He was on the Pope-mobile, he was waving, the crowds were flocking to see him. He was blessing babies and children. And then he was wheeled out onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica just behind me there, where he gave an Easter message. They will now be his last words in public, passing away just a few hours later. We know that the Pope has been very unwell of late. Double pneumonia saw him hospitalised for some 5 weeks. When he was released from Rome's Gemelli Hospital, he was under orders from doctors to take it very easy over the next 2 months. But Pope Francis, we know he was the people's Pope, and it's being reported today that there was a very respectful battle of the wills between the Pontiff and his doctors. They were urging him to rest, but he wanted to be amongst the people. And that's certainly what we saw from him on Easter Sunday. As to where we go from here, the Vatican has announced that the Pope's body will likely be moved to the Basilica to lie in state, where mourners can go and pay their respects on Wednesday. But that will be confirmed after a meeting of the cardinals tomorrow. And Ali, we have just had some more information from the Vatican. They have released the final burial wishes of Pope Francis, who has decreed that he will be buried at St. Mary Major Basilica in a simple underground tomb. That, we know, is a break from tradition. The Pope asked to be buried in the ground and without particular decoration, the Vatican has said. These details just into the newsroom now. He said he has also arranged for an unnamed benefactor to cover the costs of the burial. That's very interesting indeed. The cost of preparing the burial will be covered by a sum provided by a benefactor. Just in from the Vatican, of course, we've seen an outpouring of grief, and right now prayers are being held in St. Peter's Square, which is just behind us here. We are now in 9 days of official mourning. It's likely the Pope's funeral will take place between day 4 and day 6. There's a lot of ceremony that needs to play out now as the world comes to terms with this news. The Pope was sick, but this seems like such a shock given those extraordinary images we saw taking place right here just over 24 hours ago. So Ali, we'll have the very latest as the world reacts to Pope Francis's death throughout the Today Show.
Yeah, he was committed to his service right until the very end. Jess Millward with those new details out of Rome. Jess will return to you later in the show. For the meantime, let's go live to today's Jack Hahn, who is at St Mary's Cathedral in Sydney. Jack, good morning to you. What's the reaction been like here in Australia?
Yeah, good morning to you, Ali. Look, the words that are being used here at St Mary's Cathedral by the Archbishop himself, grief and gratitude. Grief that the fact that the Pope has passed away, but also gratitude for the work and the mark that he has left on the Catholic Church right around the world. It should certainly be pointed out that the Pope never made it here, but he did have an affinity with Australians. He often would select Australians to go to the Senate there at Vatican City, and of course he was the first Pope from the Southern Hemisphere, so this news will be hitting Australians hard. We know that more than 5 million Australians are registered Catholics according to the census in 2021. We have heard from a wide range of people, each and every single Premier and Chief Minister for the states and territories right around the country. We've also heard from the Governor-General, Sam Mostyn, and I want to bring her statement up to read to you in part. It says that I extend my respect and remembrance to the Catholic community in Australia and around the world as millions of Australians and millions of Catholics mourn the loss of a spiritual guide, father and friend. We can reflect on His Holiness, and that statement goes on to point out many of the amazing attributes that the Pope had. So we are expecting plenty of services right around the country today. This news did, of course, come as somewhat of a shock. We knew that the Pope was in ill health, but the news of his actual passing was somewhat of a shock. So we are still waiting to hear on exact times of special services that will be held right around the country. So far, Sydney and Perth are the only two capital cities that have locked-in services. Here in Sydney, the first one at 6:45, followed by one at 1:10, and then one this evening at 5:30, while in Perth at St Mary's Cathedral on St George's Terrace, there will be a service at 10:12. But Ali, as we get more information as the cathedrals wake up and lock-in times, we'll pass them along to you on today.
Yeah, Jack Hahn at St Mary's Cathedral in Sydney. Thank you, Jack.